Hi, and welcome to the Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast presented by Wolf Precision Incorporated, where we learn about and share long range shooting and custom rifle building. I am your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome to the show. Hi, and welcome to episode 226 of Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Dotson, and welcome back to the show. In this episode, we're going to be diving into, is the industry ready for modern CNC and manufacturing? And we're talking about the gunsmithing world. So that'll be a great podcast. So without further ado, here we go. All right, before we get started, I want to say a quick thank you to TriggerTech. TriggerTech is the maker of fine rifle triggers. They make a lot of different makes and models. They make them for a lot of different rifles. They make a lot of different shoes. And so one of the things, if you want to upgrade your rifle and you want to do it with a really high quality trigger, is to look at TriggerTech. They are the safest trigger on the market. They are the easiest to install, and in our minds, the easiest to adjust. So if you want to learn more, you can stop over to triggertech.com. That's triggertech.com today. We would also like to thank MDT. MDT is the maker of fine rifle chassis. They make a lot of different makes and models, from the unsung hero called the Oryx, which we feel is the best chassis that you can get for under $500, to the new ACC Premier, the ACC Elite 2. There's so many great chassis to choose from, and it really is nice to be able to get a rifle chassis that fits you properly. So from hunting to tactical, MDT has a great selection. You can stop over and see their fine selection today at mdttac.com. That's mdttac.com. So we might sound a little different today. We have a brand new microphone. I'm super excited. I am an audiophile geek. I love sound and sound production. For those that might know us a little bit better here, my background through the 80s and 90s was music. Did play in bands. I did write. It was a great time to be, our generation of the 80s and 90s, the lost children, per se. We were like free-ranging chickens with jobs. That's just the best way I can put it. But it was a great time. I learned to run sound, learned to run a lot of mics, run a lot of boards. I just love the OCD, ADD side that kicks in, I guess. And then we did a lot of video production in the early years, especially through the late 90s, early 2000s, even when we still had film HD cameras. And a lot of the reasons I think our films and some of our video productions did so well is because we focused on the quality of sound. And I always say that you can have the greatest video in the world, but if your audio is terrible or the sound is terrible, people screech, their eyes get squinty. They eventually, for whatever reason, they might not even know, but they turn it off. So we're experimenting with a new microphone. I'm super excited to get this one. I've been waiting for a while to get it. We'll see how it turns out. I'm actually recording without actually listening to it through our production studio to see how it's going to sound once we post it up and send it out to you guys. But hopefully it sounds a little bit better, sounds a little clearer. But this podcast is actually pretty serious, and it has to go with the state of the gunsmithing world. And are we ready to get into modern manufacturing and CNC when we start talking about hiring a professional gunsmith to do our chambering and to do work to your rifle? The industry itself, it's sort of like a weight and balance system here. They have locked themselves in, gunsmiths per se, they have locked themselves into a corner to where they have to stay midship. If they try to upgrade equipment and buy modern manufacturing and CNC equipment, which by the way is just ridiculously expensive, especially if you buy quality, then you start to walk towards the front of the boat and the bow sinks down because now you have to charge more for your services. And so what often happens is they go the other way. They still charge a medium price, think of standing midship, but when they go and buy their equipment, they're at the back of the boat. They're at the stern, right? And so they're able to get away with much cheaper equipment because honestly, in modern manufacturing, turning and chambering a barrel actually is some of the simplest, almost generic machining processes that you would ever have to learn to do. It's turning, it's facing, it's, a relief cut, it's a shoulder, it's reaming, it's cutting threads, and almost all of it can be done on a manual lathe. But that said, here's the problem. Because they've really blocked themselves in price-wise, and everybody and their brother wants to be a gunsmith, and think of like all of the gunsmithing schools that are out there. Like, there are some gunsmithing schools over the years that we have visited around the country. a lot of them have lathes that are 50 years old, and the machining processes that they teach them, for the most part, are what you would teach a ninth grader in machine shop class in high school back in the 60s and 70s. I mean, they spend one semester on it out of a 2-year degree, by the way. And so the art and craft of removing metal and forming metal and making it perfectly straight and true, and learning how a barrel talks to you while it's being cut, the sounds that it's making. I mean, the machine, the tools, and the part are actually speaking to you when you make and you start machining parts. The sounds that they make are telling you, how happy is the tool? How is your feeds and speeds? How sharp are your tools? Do you have a problem? Are you getting chatter? It's sort of amazing to walk into a machine shop with somebody with a ton of experience and sit in the office with them for an afternoon, just bullshitting. If they're worth their salt, there'll be a funny sound and you might not even pick up on it. Their ears will perk up and they will run out of that office like it's on fire. And they're running over to the machine and they're going through everything and they're checking tools and they heard it. The machine made a sound and they know what that sound is, right? And they're like, oh my God, it's either a tool is bad or it's chatter or something else is going wrong. But it's sort of at that level. And most of our gunsmiths are just hobbyists. It's cornered the professionalism as far as being able to go out and really have super high quality work done in a way that we've cornered and boxed in not just the gunsmith and his training, but we've also boxed in on how much he can grow and how big of a manufacturing facility he can be into, because he has to use all of this equipment that's not just beyond dated, but usually 2 and 3 and 4 owners later, completely worn out, trying to get the best out of it that he can, buying it used from a garage sale or a tire shop somewhere. The reason I bring all this up is it's amazing. Like, we spent the last 2 days here with Joe from Akuma. He's one of our applications engineers, and we're doing some pretty cool programming and machining. I mean, it's just fascinating to watch. If you're a machinist and you watch programs run, it's really, I don't want to say hypnotizing, but to watch that machine tool come alive and do all these crazy fast cuts, it's alarming. The machines are moving so fast that you better make sure you have everything right, or else you're really going to have a bad day when that machine crashes into the part at full speed, or you damage something, which is what you don't want to do, right? Because there is no time to hit the stop button. I mean, it is that fast. But what's fascinating is you can do all of this work, and then when you hit that start button and that finished part comes off, I mean, a very complicated part per se, and you start speccing it out, it is just jaw-dropping to think that was probably a week's worth of work for a machinist 40 years ago. And the tolerances that it can hold is just unbelievable. But then that got me thinking about this podcast here. And the problem in our industry right across the board is it can be had, but it's expensive, and most won't do it. And I think most of your consumers that are hiring gunsmiths sort of accept the fact that it's probably on a manual lathe, and they sort of accept the fact that, think of like if you go to YouTube and just type in the professional gunsmith or whatever you want to type in, and if you look at the shops and you look at the machines that they're using and you look at the lathes that they're using, some of them you can't really pick out the machine in the background because of all the garbage everywhere. And the other ones, these machines are 40 and 45 and 50 years old, and how many of them have had their ways scraped or had everything trued up on the machine to make sure that, the tailstock and the headstock are perfectly in line with each other. I mean, I've been very fortunate that I found a South Bend Heavy 10 when I first started machining. I looked for a year to find my lathe, and I found one in California, had 100 hours on it. It was verified through South Bend, which still exists today. And they actually had the guy's address to where it was shipped to that I was buying it from. He bought it, started in the gunsmithing, and broke his back. That lathe in 1978 cost $18,000 with no tooling. That was as much as a house back then. So you think about today, even if they can find a manual lathe, which you can find new manual lathes on the market. The problem is they're all made in China. They're all made overseas. They're all sort of lathe-like, but they're like, we had a gentleman buy a quote-unquote professional gunsmithing lathe that was marketed by a company. I don't want to say the name because I don't want to get in trouble for it, but He had started his gunsmithing shop with this, and it cost $6,000 or $7,000 brand new. And about 6 months into it, he was having all this trouble because the sand was coming out of the castings. So everything in that machine had been cast, or at least a lot of the parts were, and he was getting abrasives in and around areas it wasn't supposed to be in because of the casting process, that they either was casted into the part, not machined all out, or it just wasn't cleaned properly. But I mean, I think eventually they replaced the lathe, but then you got to tolerances parts, that they have to manually run it, and they have to be able to hold these extremely tight tolerances. At least you would think they'd want to. And the machines themselves just aren't capable. They're just not capable of holding the repeated tolerances. So like on the South Bend, it was Machine Rebuilders out of there, Pennsylvania, just to give him a shout out here. The president of the company, I spoke with him on the phone. He did, multi-million-dollar projects, right? And he come in and he looked at the lathe and he was like, "Oh my God, you realize what you have here?" He said, "This thing will last your daughter's lifetime if you take care of it." And I was so happy. It's just an incredible, it's an antique in some ways, but it's an incredibly rare antique. And the fact it had flame hardened ways, it was a tool room lathe for sure. But I still paid him to come in and tear the entire machine down and make sure that everything was perfectly straight and true, if anything needed adjusted. And the headstock and tailstock were exactly set at factory spec where they were supposed to be when it was new. I mean, it had no wear on it whatsoever. And it chambered incredible barrels. And it could hold 1 to 2 tenths all day long by hand. They just don't make them like that anymore. And it's hard to find them used in that condition. Now, a lot of lathes are marketed as in great condition, blah, blah, blah. Once used, came from a pickle factory. I remember one guy trying to sell a South Bend that said it came from a pickle factory. And when I went and looked at it, if it was making stuff for a pickle factory, it must have been one heavy-duty pickle factory. That's all I got to say. And it was all painted to look pretty, but functionally and mechanically, it was in really, really bad shape. But when you compound the fact that the tool industry or buying manual machines like that are rare and getting one of super high quality compared to, just buying, cheap Chinese junk. And then you compound that with the fact that you can go to a gunsmithing school and they'll give you an 8-week crash course on cutting 3 things. I know the one gunsmithing school didn't even let them use oil when they cut threads and other things because they didn't want the mess in the shop. And I'm like, no grease, no oil, nothing to, put on there to help the tool room. And they'll spend 8 weeks teaching you how to grind a tool to a perfect angle to make a turning tool. But that's not really the most important process that you should be learning. And you would think in the 2024, 2025 era that it shouldn't even be a conversation of hand grinding tools anymore. I mean, I learned how to do it for sure, but you should be using inserts. You should be using a DRO, which you can set up on a manual lathe. I mean, there's just so many things you can do to make it more accurate, have more accurate cuts. The tooling selections out there are a lot better. But when we were here yesterday with Joe, it was just, in my mind, I left a little bit half disheartened in the fact that I know where we're going and what we're trying to do, and absolutely stunning the quality of work that we can do to a barrel. Like using an Akuma LB3000 space turn lathe with Y-axis and live tooling. This thing is just the best of the best as far as its technology and it's capable for accuracy. But in how fast we can not just make the components that we're making, but how accurate, not just fast, but more accurate than almost any other machine in the world can cut it at. And it always comes down to price with it. So when you go onto the open market like we're at right now, like we're super excited and we're blessed to have these machines here that we have. And when we do a barrel or we're making the ACR now, it's just stunning the amount of quality work that we can get off the machine. But on the other side of it is we're competing against, in the open market in the gunsmithing world, with guys that are marketing services that really don't talk much about the equipment that they're using, and the customers pay the price for it. They can have just so many issues when trying to run them straight and true, and the gunsmiths don't want to spend any more money on maybe a better lathe or really high quality CNC lathe. And because the other part of it is they can't justify the price for it to the customer, because we've gotten so used to having a gunsmith almost in every town that can just chamber a barrel. What the customer doesn't realize is there's a world of difference between chambering a barrel on a cheapy Chinese lathe Or like if you look at one of the videos that the Ultimate Reloader did with Bruce when he rebuilt an Akuma lathe, you get a rebuilt lathe that was done properly. This will last you for generations, right? Or, getting into new CNC, which the price point is the problem. There isn't room in the gunsmithing world as far as building custom rifles to put in a $500,000 machine to cut barrels, because most customers don't know or look behind the curtains to see what they're paying for. So they just assume that a chambered barrel is a chambered barrel is a chambered barrel. And like I remember there was a really high-end hunting rifle builder. He had a TV show, so he became sort of famous through that. And he had shown some videos of, his CNC lathe and his CNC operator, and half the stuff didn't work on it. And it definitely was, 30, 40 years old, and, looked like it came out of a tire shop, and he's selling his custom rifles for $7,000 or $8,000. That's just branding and marketing. But I think you as a consumer, I think if you're interested in quality and you're interested in having the work done that you're paying for, that also means paying a little bit more for the work that you're having done. And I think if you're the consumer out there, you should be asking questions on what machines these things are being cut on. We ask it here all the time when we're dealing with any type of part or piece that's machined before it gets here. I'll take the time to ask them, hey, what are you using to cut this? What machines are you using? What tolerances are you holding? These are all super, super important questions, because it means, and it really is like an underlying prediction of the quality of the part that you're going to get. And so I think for aid to help the gunsmiths out there. So for example, we had a couple gunsmiths here that have gone bankrupt here in Pennsylvania. Friends for years, I've known them. And it's happened probably at least 2 or 3 times here just in Pennsylvania over the last 15 years that I can remember, where I have a friend calling just totally distraught, someone who's a fellow gunsmith. And he's like, I'm borderline losing my business. Now, he doesn't have overhead. Like, you're not talking overhead like we have here with getting close to $1.5 million, $2 million into a facility of machines. But it's still, he's got to make a living. He's got to pay himself. He's got to pay, insurance. And he's like, I'm going to go bankrupt. I can't make any money. And I'm like, you've got to raise your prices. And the response back is, I can't. If I raise my prices, they'll go elsewhere. And that really is the market that we're in right now as far as gunsmithing goes, because there is so many that the guys that are willing to invest in the equipment and invest in their abilities, like a real high quality machinist and a real high quality machine that's capable of doing the work that you're asking it to do, they have to compete at the lower prices, or else they feel like they're going to lose the business for the guy down the street who has a lathe in his outbuilding that was his grandfather's, who bought it used from some car business that went out of business in the 1960s. It's never been checked to see if anything's straight or true. It's never been really had any maintenance done to it. The ways have never been scraped. The headstock and tailstock have never been truly aligned with each other, or even checked for that matter. And they're going to charge the same prices as a guy with a $150,000 CNC, perfectly aligned, able to cut beautiful threads. But he's able to at least do the quality work that you're asking him to do. I mean, I liken it to this. It would be like walking into a repair shop that does auto body work, and you're going to get your car painted, and there's a guy in there with a brush and a bucket, and a paint can. Or a roller. I mean, I remember somebody sent me people send funny videos all the time. The guy was cleaning up his car after winter, and he took a roller. It actually didn't look all that bad. He did it like in flat black, but he just used paint and a roller from Lowe's, and he just went over the whole outside of the car and painted it. And at a distance, it actually, shockingly, it didn't look all that bad. I mean, it was a work vehicle, so what? But could you imagine in today's modern day, if you walked into an auto body repair shop to get your car painted, and you went back to the paint booth and there's a guy back there with a roller and a 5-gallon thing of paint, right? You wouldn't accept that there. You would expect that they're going to have really high-end air guns. You're going to expect high-quality paint booth. You're going to expect high-quality paint materials. You're going to expect, really high-end air guns or spray guns to put a really nice, beautiful coat on there without getting a bunch of orange peel and everything else that can happen. And then you're expecting a craftsman or a quality applicator that can actually tune that gun up and run that mixture through that gun to give you a beautiful paint job on your car. So why would you expect anything less from a gunsmith? And so I always reach out to other gunsmiths when they want to talk, right? And they have some questions. And sadly, I've watched 2 or 3 friends go under over the years from this. And the one particular, I don't know if I shared it here on the podcast or not, but he did really nice bluing work. He was one of the few gunsmiths that I knew that had bluing tanks. And we had actually sent him some barrels to blue back when, bluing a barrel was a thing for chromoly. And he called me up and he was in trouble. He was like, well, the guys come here, they won't pay nothing, and if I charge them more, they're going to go somewhere else and take their business elsewhere. And I was like, you got to raise your prices. You're not charging enough. And he's, well, I can't charge anymore. Well, he ended up going bankrupt. And he called me up after this whole thing had settled down. And he said he sat there at the auction while they were auctioning off everything out of his shop. And the same customers that wouldn't pay him an extra $50 a Chambers rifle were buying his stuff for pennies on the dollar. And he said he just wanted to burn his place to the ground. And so the gunsmiths out there that are actually doing a great job, I think you owe it to yourself and the gunsmith to talk with them about what equipment they're using, to talk with them about their experience. How much training have you had? How are you setting up the barrels? What kind of tooling? Are you using modern CNC technology or are you using a manual lathe? Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with a manual lathe. You can make beautiful, beautiful parts with a manual lathe if you're a high quality machinist, right? But a new machinist that really, I wouldn't even call him a machinist, a new gunsmith that just graduated from gunsmithing school that has hardly any training on the machine at all other than 1 semester. And half the semester was learning how to grind an angle on a high-speed tooling, which for me today would be a waste of time. I think I would be teaching tricks and tips on how to get beautiful cuts and cut the tolerance, So, do yourself a favor and ask the questions, but also in doing so, do the gunsmith a favor. Ask him what kind of equipment. Look, if the gunsmith is worth his salt, if he's really taking pride in his shop, he might even take you back and show you the equipment and be like, hey, come on back and let me show you. I'm really proud of this. This is a really rare machine. This is hand built, hand scraped. This thing will hold tolerance. I mean, you get a guy like that taking you in the back of the shop, just talking up his equipment like it's his race car, right? That's the guy you want to do the work. And would you mind paying that guy an extra $50 for it? Because if you can't pay that guy the same as if you just went into the guy's backyard and in the shed is an old rusty lathe with a DRO that doesn't even work anymore. The thing's covered in dirt. There's crap all over the place. There's crap all over the lathe. There's tooling all over the place. It doesn't look like it's been cleaned in 35 years. And you're going to pay him the same price, but you don't get to look at his equipment. So he's going to laugh all the way to the bank, sticking your hard-earned money in his pocket where he hasn't spent a dime on equipment in years. While the other guy is trying to do super high-quality work and trying to build a business and really investing not just himself, but high-quality equipment to do the work that he is being asked to do to the best of his abilities, he can't get paid. And there is a big difference between the two. So when you're getting out there and you're shopping around for a gunsmith, or you're getting around and shopping around for someone to do some high-quality work, I think just as a consumer side, don't be afraid to ask some questions. And, nobody ever asks. And I think in a lot of ways, a lot of gunsmiths, just like guys that do things for a living, they're really proud of their equipment. And if you just ask them those questions, my God, they're probably going to go into a 15-minute detail of where they got it from. And that's the guy you want. And please do not be afraid to pay the guy an extra $50 or $100 for his work. I remember years ago, this last year I'll share with you, my lathe cost more. I think till it was all said and done, I probably had, and we're talking late 90s, early 2000s, till I bought my first lathe, right? It was almost $20,000 used till I bought the lathe itself and then some tooling for it. And then I paid a real professional, to come in and go over everything. We tore it all down. We made sure everything was perfectly straight and true. I mean, it's a belt-driven, beautiful machine that can just make incredible parts, right? And so I was proud of it. I still have it, by the way. It's not here at my new shop, although I do want to get it down here just to show it off in the corner. And, it still cuts. I still work with it once in a while, making stuff, or if I have to do something silly by hand. I get a giggle every time I fire it up because it's like an old friend. It's been with me forever. But after investing all that money in the lathe and equipment and reamers, there's so much involved in getting started. And really, I started doing it for myself. And then people were asking, hey, you got a lathe, you got chambers. Would you cut a barrel for me? And then I realized, hey, I could actually make a living at this and make a couple dollars to help support my family and help pay for the equipment. And I went to all kinds of training. I've traveled the country going to different classes and different professionals and different people who are experts in different parts of machining. And I loved every minute of it. I'm an OCD learning type of guy. But I went to the local range here, and a guy walked up to me and he was like, hey, dude, you chamber barrels? And I'm like, well, yeah, sort of. I said, I do it part-time on the side. I said, what do you charge? And, there was like an awkward 30-second pause there. And I was like, I charge $389 to do a barrel and to do the muzzle. And you would think that I slapped his wife. He was pissed. He was like, that's effing ridiculous. $99 is the going rate around here. I wouldn't pay anybody any more than $99. This guy went on this rant for 2 minutes. And I'm like, buddy, if you want your barrel chambered at Walmart, go to Walmart. I can't do it for any less than that. I have 4 times the amount in my machine than most gunsmiths would ever dream of. And that's just the machine. So I have to charge that price for the quality of work that I do. This guy wanted nothing of it. He was just, and I left sort of gutted. I thought, you're putting all this time and effort in. You're really trying to set yourself up with really high quality equipment to do the artist part of what we're asked to do, the craft part. We can't do it with garbage tools. We have to have really good equipment if we're going to get the best out of us and we're going to do the best job for the customer. Well, fast forward about 3 years to the gun show, true story. And this guy walks up to me, and it was him. I recognized him right out of the gate. How could you forget a guy like that, right? And he started talking to me. Hey, buddy, you chamber barrels. He didn't recognize me because I had my Wolf Precision shirt on, and I was all cleaned up and, working a booth at a show. And I'm like, yeah. I said, and before you ask, my price went up to $489. And I was looking right in his eyes. And he gave me the dirtiest look because he instantly recognized me. And he went storming off. I was like, so in some ways it was a sort of funny. I enjoyed it a little bit, right? But I wasn't going back down that road again. I was proud to tell him that I actually raised my prices, and that's how I could actually afford to be at that show. Had I just fallen into that trap of charging $99 for whatever the going rate was, I'd be bankrupt just like the 3 friends that I've known over the last 20 years. And the only reason I was standing where I was at is because I held my ground, and I would prefer to do less but better. So in some ways, it's a shooting podcast. In some ways, it's a life podcast. And in other ways, it's a business podcast. And, trying to reach out, help, and share information. And in this way, if you're a gunsmith and you're listening to this podcast, I hope I don't insult you. I'm just being honest. If you're a consumer going out there and doing business, I'm trying to support my local gunsmith. I'm trying to tell them that, hey, you got to charge more. And I'm trying to tell the customer that ask what's behind the curtain. And if the guy's proud as a peacock with some really great equipment, pay the man. Give him a couple extra bucks for all the training that he's done, for all the care and love that he's put into having a beautiful piece of equipment down there that is an artist's paintbrush. And if you want Leonardo da Vinci to paint you a painting, pay the man. That way he can afford to keep at his craft. So when I was back there with Joe yesterday, we were running this machine. I'm just stunned that here we are, 20-some years later, standing at this machine that is just out of this world. The technology is just, I don't want to say overwhelming because it's not. There's a lot to learn. I've been training on it for 2 years. I've been training on CAD and CAM for 2 years. I've been in classes all over the country, and I am still in training. And I'm not even scratching the surface as to what the machine can truly do. We're getting really good at it. We're able to do so many more parts now. We're able to really control a lot of parameters in it. We can really get this machine to run. We can get it to sing. It is Leonardo da Vinci's paintbrush. The quality of work that we can get out of that machine now. And yet, there's still so many more things that it's capable of that I'm not ready to do yet. There's automation, there's robots, there's bar feeders, there's all these really cool things that we could do to even do lights out technology, where the machine could run making aces for 4 or 5 hours after we leave at the end of the day. It's just how far they've come. But on the flip side of it is too, there's a little knot in your stomach that says that, yeah, you've really come a long ways and you've got some world-class machines, but I'll never go back and unforget that the market that we're competing in and how we justify our prices and how we never even get the opportunity to tell people why we charge more or why we have to. And then some people don't care. The chamber job is a chamber job in their mind. So is the painting on a cereal box and Leonardo da Vinci. In their minds, they're just a poster. It's just another drawing. So I guess my advice is, and to any gunsmith out there, don't be afraid to charge what you have to pay yourself and make a living, and to be able to reinvest in your equipment and reinvest in your building and buy the new tools that you need, buy the new inserts that you've been waiting to do, get the tune up on the machine that you wanted or the machine you're saving up for, or don't be afraid to charge for that, because you will work for nothing and slowly go under and drown, and you will learn to not love what you do. And then for the consumers out there, don't be afraid to ask the gunsmith that you're asking to potentially do work for you. Ask him about his paintbrush. Ask him about his art and craft. Ask him about the equipment that he's using. And most of them are going to be super excited that you've even asked, because most people don't. They don't care. And the other thing is you get to hear a little bit about what he's gone through and what he's done to get that equipment up and running and where he found it at. Like mine was shipped on a truck from California. It took me a year to find it. I was like a kid. I'll continue on another story and tell you about how it got dropped at a gas station a mile away from my house, which was totally panic mode. So I'll tell you that story in the next podcast about how my beautiful South Bend Heavy 10 got dropped outside of a gas station a mile from my home when it got delivered. So I'll share that story with you in the next one. But we did get it home, for the record. But, don't be afraid to ask. I think it's really cool, and it builds a relationship and a relationship of trust. And you really do know what kind of work you're going to get. And the guy really cares about his passion and cares about making high quality rifles and doing the high quality work that you're asking him to do. And here we are 20 some years later with machines that cost 50, 60, and 70 times what we spent to get started. And that little devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, or both are in your ears, like, oh man, you did it now. You realize what you've done. Like, you have these aerospace machines. Is this the industry that you should have these machines in? And in my heart and my mind, it's always a yes. I mean, to be able to offer the quality of work that we do, to be able to do it better and more efficiently with machines that are just capable of doing things that most people can't watch. It's just so fast and so accurate. It increases the value to the customer because it's much higher quality, and sometimes that helps offset the cost of the machines, because the machines take a lot less time to do this type of work that we're doing, because they're capable of doing such much more complicated parts than what we're asking it to do here in our world. So if you get a chance, if you want to stop over to any of our YouTube channels, you'll see a video where the Lathe mill got dropped off, and the install was really cool. And we had to cut this giant hole in the wall of our building on the inside to get them in. And sort of an introductory. It was a really awesome moment in our lives and big step forward. And of course, we were always blessed. So I always say that there's always someone else looking out for us and helping us make the decisions. And in this case, sometimes pushing us to make the decisions to make us grow, saying, hey, you sat here long enough. It is time for you to move along and make that next big scary step in life. And here you go. 2 weeks before Christmas, you get a 90-day notice that all the businesses in your facility have to leave because a bank purchased the whole facility. And there you are. You're like, wow. So now we're buying a building. And if we're going to buy a building and we get the opportunity, let's go ahead and put the machines in. I mean, that was sort of the calling. And here we sit 2 years later. April 1st will be 2 years we've been in this building, and just amazing to watch where we've come and grown. And that was just all with faith and guidance and somebody upstairs looking out for us, helping us make the right decisions, and in some case pushing us to grow and giving us a pat on the backside saying, okay, it's time to step off the edge and get going. And here we are. So I hope this came off in good spirit, and I think both from the gunsmithing side as well as the consumer side, I think there's a lot in the conversation that could happen there. And I think looking out for each other, especially your local gunsmith, you don't think about him much until you need him. But, when he goes under and he's not there anymore, all the things that could have kept him around and just those couple extra dollars you're willing to pay for his expertise and his time and the quality equipment that he's running means the difference between him being a generational gunsmith, and you're doing work for your kids and building all this cool stuff for you over the years as you learn and grow in the art of long-range shooting or hunting or whatever sport you're into. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. I really appreciate it. I do want to say a quick shout-out to Krieger Barrels. Krieger makes incredible barrels. They're a family-owned and operated business throughout the great state of Wisconsin. You can stop over and see their new program called Krieger Direct, where they try to constantly put barrels up for sale. So you can try to sneak in and get one for your project if you're running short on time. So you can possibly grab a barrel and have it in as little as 2 to 3 business days. So if you want the best and you need it now, stop over to Krieger Barrels and look at KriegerDirect.com today. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. If you enjoyed the podcast and you would like to leave a comment down below or share it, we certainly appreciate that as well. My name is Jamie Dotson. I'm your host, and you're listening to Wolf Precision's Long Range Shooting and Custom Rifle Building Podcast.